It's just a science project.
Silent breed is people!
You know, a doctor friend once said the same thing to me. Frankenstein was his name.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
That sounds like something out of science fiction.
Please explain to me the scientific nature of the whammy.
You live in a spaceship, dear.
So?
Yes, science!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Hello and welcome to episode 246 of Science on Top. Today is Sunday the 9th of October 2016. I'm Ed Brown and I'm joined by Dr. Shane Joseph.
G'day.
And Lucas Randall.
Hi.
And this is the Nobel Prize edition. We'll be taking a look at the winners of the Nobel Prizes for Physiology and Medicine, Physics and Chemistry. I was surprised and a little bit shocked to see that nobody on the Science on Top crew was awarded anything. An accidental oversight on the committee, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Better luck next year.
Because we're so deserving of a prize, aren't we? Yes. I can't think.
You're right. We probably should have gotten something last week for the Ig Nobels, but anyway.
Yes. Agreed.
The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Yoshinori Ohsumi for his discoveries of mechanisms for autophagy. Shane, autophagy is the process by which cells break down and sort of recycle themselves. Is that a fair way of saying?
It's essentially like the waste disposal units of your cells. And it makes sense because, as your cells are replicating and, making new parts for themselves, it obviously creates a lot of waste and you want to get rid of that sort of stuff very quickly. And the interesting thing about this prize is that it was awarded to this guy for his work that was done in 1992. So quite a long time ago. And what's even more interesting is that he was just doing this on yeast because he was kind of curious. He just wanted to find out about genetics. He's a geneticist. He was just interested in genetic processes and how things do what. He used yeast as a model because yeast are very, very easy to work with. And he discovered the key genes that are involved in yeast that enable this autophagy to occur. What's great about this is that this has then been applied to, people have used the discovery of these genes to find out analogues in higher organisms, such as ourselves. And this has led to a realization that, well, in a lot of diseases like, for example, Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, this is where certain autophagy processes break down. I think for Parkinson's disease, there's a certain protein in the brain that does not get cleared properly because there's a faulty gene in this autophagy process. And that's what the idea, the thinking is that if we can, find a way to get the body back to clearing these proteins, you can halt the progression of Parkinson's and other diseases like it. Okay. So what's great about this is that his groundbreaking work in 1992 spawned this entire industry of this research into autophagy and how it applies to medicine. And that's what's really great. For me, this take-home message here is that, I'm going to get on my soapbox a bit. Nowadays, there seems to be a reluctance to fund just basic science into stuff because wouldn't this be kind of cool? Or, this, just to further human knowledge. When this researcher, Yoshinori Ohsumi, was doing this work, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to revolutionize, medical science here. He was just interested in yeast cells and how they work.
Yeah.
And he
was following a thread and seeing how it unwound. He wasn't actually looking to unwind anything. He was just following the thread.
Yeah, he wasn't thinking, in 30 years' time, I'm going to be standing in Stockholm and, getting a prize from the King of Sweden. No, he was just like, what does this yeast cell do? How does it work? It's just basic curiosity into these things that, and so, there is a place for the kind of research that is funded these days, which is a lot of which is funded these days, which is very much application, process driven. Like, we want to find this so we can market this, so we can build, so we can, create this medicine. It's, it's a very directed sort of form of research. There's a place for that. Yeah. But there's also a place for this sort of research where some guy just goes, I wonder what this does. Because, they don't always
blue sky thinking.
Yeah. They don't always spawn things like, this sort of autophagy kind of phenomenon, but some of them do. And even if they don't, that doesn't make them any less worthy in a lot of ways, because it's still furthering
absolutely not.
Our knowledge of things. So I really like this. I really like the fact that this guy was just doing random research on yeast cells and managed to, show, to basically, and we're a long way off from using this in a clinical process. the drugs for these sorts of things won't become available for years, but we're on the way to doing that. So
yeah. And it's impressive just that he spawned this new branch of research, really. And I did see a lot of people are a little bit sort of, why is it just this one guy who gets the Nobel Prize? Why not his co-workers, collaborators, Noboru Mitsushima and Tomotsu Yoshimori, for example, who he sort of mentored them, I think, as well. But I think he's a pioneer, obviously, and who am I to say whether or not the Nobel Committee made the right decision or not?
I'm going to guess that he was actually the corresponding author on this paper. So that goes a long way.
Probably,
he was probably the head of the lab. I'm guessing this Noboru Mitsushima was probably a student. I think.
Yep.
So the students don't get the prizes. It's the head of the lab, which is fair because the head of the lab is directing the research. So
yeah, but it is interesting. He used his Nobel acceptance speech to talk about the importance, as you say, of that blue sky research, that basic science, especially given that I think this is like the most successful period of Japanese Nobel scientists. I think just in this century, there have been 16 Nobel Prizes gone to Japanese scientists. There haven't been that many years in this century.
No, no, you're right.
But it also comes at a time when funding for science in Japan is on the decrease, and there's a lot of concern among scientists in Japan about the direction that the country is going from that point of view. So, very interesting. But thoroughly deserved as well, I think. The Nobel Prize in Physics was divided, with one half awarded to David J. Thouless and the other half jointly to F. Duncan M. Haldane and J. Michael Kosterlitz for theoretical discoveries of topological phase transitions and topological phases of matter. All fairly self-explanatory. I don't think we need to go into that.
The title's enough, clearly. Yeah.
Well, basically, this is looking at how materials perform at extremes of nature's limits. So close to absolute zero or, high magnetic fields. And particularly things like superconductors. Mm-hmm. Looking at how electrical flow changes on something that is a superconductor when it's close to absolute zero. As the temperature rises, that superconductivity changes. But then that changes again when you introduce magnetic fields, things like that. Basically, these guys borrowed a field of mathematics, usually for geometric shapes, topology, and found ways of using that to look at how superconductivity and exotic matter behaves. Is that a fair approximation?
Yeah,
Lucas?
There's really not much I can add to what you've just said.
So I stole your thunder, sorry.
Yep, that's pretty much everything I was going to say. So, topology is all about looking at, mathematically looking at the shapes of things. So topologies are very applicable to astrophysics, for example, in terms of looking at the theoretical models as to the shape of the universe.
Yes.
So, it is an area that's quite hot, but applied at this level, and certainly looking at the looking at the quantum physics side of things, what they've done is really come up with a new ways of looking at how these materials act under certain conditions. And it's important because the next breakthroughs in computing over the next few decades are really going to hinge on this sort of work, because it's similar work that was really done in the 1940s that at the time was, as Shane was saying with the medical prize, these people, these scientists weren't thinking of what the applications were when they were doing it. They were just playing around with materials, which became known as semiconductors, which they didn't really understand why they acted the way that they did, and they didn't think there was really any application for these things in the real world. So, but they set about learning about them and describing how they worked. And then years later, those things became the basis of integrated circuits, basically the transistor silicon chips that are absolutely in everything you own now. It's like they're even in light bulbs now, for God's sake. I mean, who would have thought that the light bulb would get more complicated? But yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. So it's this sort of work that describes how things work and how the interrelationships between the flow of electrons through superconductors that are cooled right down to almost absolute zero, versus when they start to warm up, what they find is in wires these things tend to just stop superconducting just all at once, right across the whole wire. Whereas in different shapes of materials, they conduct in different ways, and you'll have patchy areas where they stop superconducting, other areas where they don't. And so they've taken this topological approach to explain and to explore this a little bit better. So I don't think any of us really, certainly least of all me, but there's no real understanding yet of what the application of this is going to be in the future. But it describes the fundamental properties of materials that we know are going to be important in the future. So I guess that's what the real win is in this case.
Yeah. I guess that's what the Nobel Prizes are all about. It's not so much discoveries that have come into play and have become useful, but are likely to be amazingly useful in the future, if that makes sense. It's kind of a midway point sometimes. Yeah. Also interesting to note, all three of them are British as well, which is kind of interesting. You get the Japanese, now you get British. And let's move on to the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, which was jointly awarded to Jean-Pierre Sauvage, Sir J. Fraser Stoddart, and Bernard L. Feringa for the design and synthesis of molecular machines. Nanobots, basically.
Who doesn't love nanobots?
Everyone loves nanobots, except when they're bad nanobots in sci-fi that are going to kill you or whatever. But, European chemists, basically, who pioneered the nanobot field, I guess, with making molecules that turn, using them to become motors and engines, and even something, quote, resembling a motor car, but very, very, very small.
If you squint, if you really squint, it looks like a motor car.
Yeah, and if you squint and you're using a microscope.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
Very cool. And again, the applications for this are maybe hard to see, although not, I think, too difficult to envision, but it's something that's going to take off in leaps and bounds in the upcoming years.
Of course.
Didn't we discuss this thing from 2011 when they made the four-wheel drive nano car? I'm sure we discussed it on the show. Or
Quite possible.
Was that before we started it? When did we start
2011.
What year was it?
2011.
Yeah, 2011.
We might have discussed it then, because I'm looking at the images. It's really familiar.
Well,
actually, you're right. Now I do remember we did.
Well, it says in 2011 the group built the first four-wheel drive nano car, so that's probably what we covered. I can't remember doing it myself, but
probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So there you go, listeners. Go back to that where we probably went into better detail.
2011, yeah. I mean, the obvious, the obvious application for this is that one day we will be able to deliver things into the bloodstream that are less than microscopic sized. I mean, these things are basically just molecules that
Yeah.
And if we, if there is an ability to use them as a delivery system, for example, this changes pretty much everything.
And not just the body as well. We're just talking about how small transistors are getting as well.
Yeah.
You can send a few molecules in to repair a chip or something like that.
Yeah.
So, groundbreaking stuff. Very important things. And I haven't seen much controversy about any of the Nobel Prizes apart from the whole why is it only Yoshinori Ohsumi getting the medicine prize, which I think, even that's fairly well explained. But impressive things. I don't think there's much more that we need to say about, do we?
Well, it's funny, if you're going to get political, Sir Fraser Stoddart was one of the awardees for this prize.
Yes.
He basically used this as he decided to attack the Brexit vote using this podium, basically saying, look, the only reason we managed to get this working, we collaborated was because of the free exchange of ideas across borders. And with Brexit, that's changed everything now. So he doesn't see how this could...
Well, will change, yes.
Will change, yeah.
Yeah. Fair point. I don't think there's much more that we can say.
Oh, no.
I'm Australian podcast.
Yeah, I was
to
just
get
going to
political about that.
Tint at the controversy. I have no wish to get on that particular soapbox. Thank you very much.
No, but I do tend to agree with him.
Yeah.
But all right. So those are the Science Nobel Prizes. We won't go into economics or Peace Prize. You can find them on other podcasts, I'm sure. But we'll have more information about those awards at scienceontop.com/246. And at our website, you can find all the ways to get in touch with us as well. Please, if you get a chance, leave a review on iTunes. As I mentioned last week, we'll be taking about 3 weeks off because I'll be travelling around England, so you'll just have to manage without us for the time being. Thank you, Shane and Lucas.
No problem, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
This episode was edited with charming optimism by Marcos Benamou. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back in a few weeks' time, putting science on top of the agenda. Join us then.
And now, Professor Thor Hans Hansson will give us some insights into the discoveries that led to the Nobel Prize.
So, I'm very happy to be here and to tell you about this very deep and actually very beautiful work that is at the basis for this year's prize. So I brought my lunch, and here you see, it's a cinnamon bun. Here I have another thing. I have a bagel, okay? And here I have a pretzel. It's a Swedish pretzel with 2 holes in it. Now, for us, these things are very different. This is sweet, this is perhaps salty, different shapes, etc. But if you are a topologist, it's only one thing that is really interesting with these things in which they differ. This thing has no hole. The bagel has 1 hole. The pretzel has 2 holes. The number of holes is what the topologist would call a topological invariant. And just as you cannot have a half a hole or 2 2/3 holes, you can, for a topological invariant, only have integer numbers. Okay? Only integers.